Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to the attic. It's time for another voicemail. Today's voicemail is from an anonymous caller. Let's listen to what they have to say.
Hi, Lloyd. I'm hoping that you do play this message. So, yes, I would give you permission to play it. Because I would like to hear your take on this, as well as other, maybe like in the comments, other viewers who may be non-believers in like a higher power or in like an afterlife. Because I'm kind of going through it right now. My sister-in-law passed away like almost a week ago. And, it's kind of trying to like make sense of this all, because when she passed, one of the doctors came in and, said, I'm a man of faith and I believe that it might not make sense to us, but God needed her or something along, we've all heard that spiel. I grew up a Jehovah's Witness, so it was, you'll see her in paradise. And, my husband and his mom, they believe that she's in heaven with her best friend and, others who have passed. And I don't want them to not have that. I would never, I want them to have that, because that's a beautiful thought. It just doesn't, I don't know what would make me believe that at this point. I don't know if something happened, people say they have experiences. I don't even know if that would do it for me. I feel like I would be like, I need to go seek medical professional help, because I think something's wrong with me. Yeah, it's really hard to wrap my head around this situation, because it's like, to me, I feel as though if there was an all-powerful God and they had this power to take away this pain, and they're a God of love, like everybody says, they wouldn't be able to see people in pain, because there's a pain in losing somebody you love, and then there's a separate pain with seeing people that you love in pain. And if I had the power to take that away right now, I would do it in a second. So you're telling me that this God could take this away, and they're just up there like, nah, I'm not going to do that. It makes no sense. So, I don't know. Honestly, that would make me even not want to worship that God even more. Yeah, so I don't know if people that have lost people. I know you've lost your mother. People that have lost people that are non-believers. I know how people that are believers deal with it and cope with it. But people that are not believers, I would just be curious how they get through this process and how they wrap their head around the situation. Yeah, I guess that's why I'm calling. So hopefully I get to hear an answer and some, some suggestions. I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, seek a psychological, a psychologist, go and talk to somebody. But aside from that, what are some things? All right. Thank you.
Thank you for your message. I'm really sorry to hear about your loss. So, deepest condolences on the loss of your sister-in-law, who clearly meant an awful lot to you. And I fully relate when you said that it's not just about the sense of loss, it's seeing the pain in others. So, perhaps the immediate family of your sister-in-law, observing the pain that they're going through is like a whole other sphere of pain that impacts on you, almost like a rebound effect. So I definitely empathize with your situation. And yes, I have to do that disclaimer, because it sounds like you are experiencing tremendous feelings of loss and anxiety and emotional trauma due to what you're going through. And I'm not a psychologist or in any way a mental health professional, so I have to cover myself, as I'm sure you can understand. You are asking for my perspective, I guess, on mortality from the perspective of a non-believer. And by the way, I fully agree with a lot of what you were just saying about, the whole issue of suffering. If you're a God who is all-powerful and omnipotent and able to step in to stop suffering and stop death, and you're not doing that, even though you have the power to do it, then you're effectively complicit in what's happening. Especially if it turns out that you are intervening in other areas, as believers will often assert, oh, God, help me do this, or God, help me do that, or God, help me get the perfect job, or God, help me make it through this root canal operation. Fill in the blanks, I guess, ad nauseum of the many ways that God apparently intervenes in day-to-day life, but he can't be bothered to stop someone dying in a car accident or a child dying of cancer, So I wholeheartedly agree with your sentiments, and I think it's a problem that believers will always have a really hard time answering and defending. I don't think there is a defense for it, to be honest. No matter how many logical acrobatics you attempt and philosophical acrobatics, for me, the whole issue of suffering is just a slam dunk when you actually bother to think about it. But mortality and dealing with mortality, it's interesting actually, because as I'm filming this on May 22nd, and yesterday was May 21st, which is a very difficult day for me, because it's the anniversary of my mother's death, who you mentioned in your voicemail. So this year, May 21st marks 22 years since my mother died. And, there's still a hole. There's still a hole in my life where she belongs. And every year I kind of count how old she would be. So she died when she was 53. So 53 plus 22 is 75, which is, a decent, there are plenty of 75-year-olds around, So it's difficult. It's difficult to process her passing even decades later for me. And I will say that shedding the indoctrination and shedding all of the superstitious thinking and religious indoctrination and frankly wish thinking surrounding an afterlife and resurrection and paradise, shedding all that has actually helped me to grieve, because I've been able to confront my loss head on, rather than simply living in denial. Oh, well, yes, she died, but I'm going to see her again, so it's no biggie, you know? I would find it even more difficult if I were of the religious mindset where it was like, oh, well, she's in heaven looking down on me. I think it's grotesque, by the way, that you have doctors in your area who will say things like God needed her. I think that's bordering on gross negligence for a doctor to say something so hugely inappropriate in the immediate wake of the death of someone in his hospital who he's perhaps been administering care to. That's really messed up. But I've made a video before, actually. Maybe Tibor can be very gracious and provide a thumbnail, where I've mused on mortality or the afterlife, and I've made a point in that video, which I think is, you know, still stands, that any mother is always going to want the very best for her children. And the worst scenario that any sort of normal parent could go through would be witnessing the suffering of their children and not being able to do anything about it. So with all of the suffering that I've experienced, you know, we all suffer through life. I'm not saying I'm in any way conspicuous in the suffering I've been through, but I have been through suffering, and I've even, dare I say it, over the last couple of years, been through a mental health crisis that in some ways is ongoing. And if a parent, if my mother were to be floating around in the ether, watching that, and not being able to put her arm around her son, I know who she was as a person and as a mother, and I know that that would be hell. That would be hell for her. So I really do obviously distance myself from any fantasies regarding the afterlife now that I am atheist. And I find that though dealing with the loss of bereavement, even decades later, is always difficult and always going to be difficult, it's certainly easier for me to figure things out in my head when you take away the kind of static, the awful kind of din of confusion when it comes to religious thinking surrounding an afterlife. I can accept that she's gone. I can accept that she's gone, and I can process that. And it might take years, it might take decades, but, you know, my mum loved Eva Cassidy. I'm going to try not to cry. My mum loved Eva Cassidy. And in the weeks or days before she died, one of the albums that we were playing constantly for her was an Eva Cassidy album. And Eva Cassidy herself died, incidentally, before my mum died. But one of the songs on the album is Time is a Healer. You know, just saying those words now, immediately the song's playing in my head. And I think that that's true, you know. I think time is a healer when it comes to loss. The hole is always there. You're always going to experience a chasm in your life where that person ought to be, like a crater that's been left on you as a person. But you learn to continue. You put one foot in front of the other and you carry on. And dealing with that pain, indeed any pain or trauma that you experience in your life, adds to who you are as a person, so that overcoming trauma and overcoming loss crafts you into the person that you are. I would be a different person if my mum were still here, if she were 75 years old and in my life now. Maybe I'd have my shit together a little bit more. Maybe I'd be far happier. Maybe something else in my life would be wrong. Who knows? But the thing is, whoever I would be if mum was still here, I would be not me. I would be a different Lloyd completely. I am who I am now because of the loss and the trauma that I've been through in my life, including the loss of my mother. And all I can do is honor her memory by being the best man that I can be and the best father to her grandchildren that I can be. That's all I can do. You can only do or worry about what it's in your power to do something about. And I have no control over the fact that she died. She was going to die with or without any intervention from me. History was going to unfold the way it unfolded. What matters is how you respond and how you overcome these painful experiences, making sure that those who you care for and those who you can have an impact on positively, making sure that they're looked after. That's all you can really do. So I don't know whether that's helpful for you. Yes, I can imagine in some ways it is easier to deal with death when you're just kind of kicking it into the long grass and saying, oh, well, I don't have to worry about that because they're in heaven, or I'm going to see them in the paradise, or whatever. Maybe there is merit to being in denial. Maybe. But speaking personally, as someone who has spent a lot of time thinking about this, I think I'd rather deal with it head on. I'd rather be living in reality. And I feel comfortable with my grasp on my own mortality and on the mortality of those I care about. And I think that death is a part of life. I've actually done some kind of mental gymnastics, or not gymnastics. I've done some kind of thought processes, thought experiments, where I've come to the conclusion that if mum hadn't died, I probably would not have ended up being a father to my two girls, Jessica and Julia. So that's unfortunately the way life works, without wanting to get all Lion King on you all, circle of life and all that. But in a weird way, and I say this about myself as well, sometimes there needs to be death in order for there to be life, and in order for there to be growth. And, when I die, I take great comfort in knowing that there will probably be life due to me no longer being around. That's the weird thing about it all. I could make a whole separate video about what if scenarios and how messed up these things can get when you really start thinking about them. But hopefully that's plenty for now. I hope some or all of what I've said has been helpful for you, and please do look after yourself, and yes, get help with your mental health as needed. But that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for watching this voicemail. If you'd like to leave a voicemail, the thing to do is go to speakpipe.com/Cedars, remembering to indicate clearly if you don't want me to answer your message or make it public on this channel. But that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for watching.